everyone. This is Donna Hanson, CSP and Nevin Award winner, and Warwick Merry.
Yes, hello, Warwick Merry, CSP. Thank you so much for joining us today. We wanted to give you a bit of a heads up on Zoom. There's been a lot of people asking, how do I use it, how to get the most out of it? And so we thought, let's put something together that you'll get some great value from.
So Warwick, first thing lots of people ask is, with the Zoom program, what's the difference between a meeting and a webinar?
Look, technically, they're very, very similar. So it's all about how do you want to use the actual service. My theory is if you want to present to a large number of people, and I'm thinking over, say, 15, and you're just presenting and conveying information, that's what webinar's for. It's very much a speaker to audience scenario. Zoom meeting is when everyone involved is going to have some kind of conversation. If they get too big, they can be unwieldy, but there's some great tips like breakout rooms that helps manage that. But essentially, Zoom meeting is when you're getting a lot of people together to talk about something. Zoom webinar is when you're transferring information to a large number of people.
So Warwick, as part of what we're doing here, I think the first thing we need to look at before we even look at meetings and webinars is some setup, right?
Correct. And the setup features for Zoom are so powerful. There are so many things you can do, so many restrictions you can have. There's a lot of conversation about how there's Zoom bombings and people coming in and sharing inappropriate things. There's an Australian comedian who's requesting Zoom meetings to come into university lectures and actually crack some jokes, etc. But there are some restrictions you can put in place so that you as the moderator can control who gets there. So Donna, take us to it. What are some of the settings that we can play with?
All right, well, let's head over to my Zoom account and we'll see what we've got. So Warwick, this is what the back end or the settings of the Zoom profile look like. Now, I think people will be able to see here that down here where we've got the user type, I'm on an enterprise version and it enables me to have 500 people in a meeting and 500 in a webinar. And like you said before, we probably won't want 500 in a meeting. What do you think the good number is for having a meeting and being able to see people's face in sort of that gallery mode? What do you think is a good number?
It really depends, because I've been talking with some of my clients and they're running meetings of around 200 people, but they have prescribed breakouts. So most of the time it's spent in a breakout of say 5 to 10. Personally, any more than about 20, maybe 25 people in a meeting is challenging to handle from a moderator's point of view unless you are using breakout. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't give it a go. Give it a crack, see what works for you. Everyone's different. Everyone's industry is different. The key thing for using online meetings is to keep people engaged. Any more than a small group of around 20, people start to wax and wane their interest. So that's what I'd look at.
Awesome. Okay, so this is the profile page. I want to bring us down to the important settings. So we're just going to focus today on the things that are going to be quick, easy, that you need to get started with straight away. So as we go down, these are probably good things. We'll stop and start and talk about things. So this is the meeting section. So I've got host video switched on, which is a great thing, and participant video switched off. So I'm guessing that's probably the good thing with what we were talking about with the Zoom bombing.
Yeah, for sure. You want to make sure that I always set my Zoom video and audio off for the participants. That way I can control who's sharing. Typically I'll set up most of them to share as we get in there, but it's that level of control.
I guess too, it depends on what sort of meeting it is. Like if you're doing a one-on-one coaching session with someone, you know, you're happy to have them come in with their cameras and everything on. But in a group dynamic, it can be a bit unsettling, especially for people who haven't experienced these virtual presentations or virtual meetings.
Particularly because so many people are working from home, and you'll get people come on and they're going, "What's that, honey? Can you bring me a coffee?" And the dog's barking and the kids are going off. So it's just a lot more professional if it's all silent to start with, and you can bring them in as you need to.
Awesome. So let's go down the page a bit. I guess another one here is join before host. I would certainly like to generally have that switched off.
Yeah, for me, and we're going to see a setting shortly about having a waiting room. So setting up a waiting room is a nice way of getting people to go into the waiting room, and there's a screen that says, you're in a waiting room. So you don't want them to start without you because you don't know who's in the room. And it just, again, it's that professionalism and control.
Also, another piece further down the screen that can be really helpful, particularly if you're dealing with something a little more sensitive or you're trying to maintain extra piece of security, is require a password when scheduling new meetings. So this will generate a password that people will have to put in. So that will also minimise the possibility of people coming in who weren't supposed to be there.
Yeah, Zoom now recommends that you have this on all the time. If you're generating links and sending it to people, typically it will include the password in the link. So therefore, the invited guest still just clicks on the link, but the password's part of it. But what it means is people can't randomly put in meeting numbers or webinar numbers and join without having that password.
Awesome. Further down here, we've also got require password for participants joining by phone, and the option you mentioned before about muting people on entry.
Yeah, so I always have mine turned off just because of technology being frustrating. I've had a few people who are swearing at the keyboard as all of a sudden finally it connects. Not the good thing that you're after, so it's good to have that sort of disconnected.
Awesome. Okay, so down to the next piece, the chat area. Now, I always allow people to have chat, but this is one of the options that I've sort of been encouraging people to have switched on or activated. What are your thoughts?
I always want chat. I want it on. Now, I've been seeing a lot of discussions out there. Some people don't like it. There's some people are quite prescriptive about saying, all things must go through the moderator, etc. Can I tell you, if I'm sitting there watching an hour and a half workshop session, whatever, in the same way that I'm going to be whispering to the person I'm sitting next to, just a running commentary, I'm cracking jokes. I use chat like a demon. And I have so many people say to me afterwards, thank you so much, because it's just a bit more engaging. Yeah, there's a risk of people chatting and saying stuff you don't want them to, but I really think that it's important to... this is just a different modality. If they're in a classroom, you're going to be chatting to someone next to you. If I'm not chatting to them, I'm going to talk to the dog. I'm going to turn my screen off and go and get a coffee and come back and pretend I was there. So I'm all for making sure chat is always on.
Okay, what do you think about prevent participants from saving the chat?
I'm really not that worried. It depends, again, on what you're talking about. Sometimes there's really good information in there. So there could be links to different websites, different content, different, sometimes you'll add documents, etc. Some moderators say, I want to control who that goes to. So fair enough. Other chats, it's free for all. Yep, if you want it, save it down. So you can personalize it depending on the chat.
Awesome. So we can see that there's options there for private chat, auto-saving chat, and I'm guessing we don't want sounds when participants join or leave, and we probably want this option switched off, file transfer at this point in time with some of the stuff that's going around. What are your thoughts?
I have it turned on, and the reason I have it turned on is often I'll be having a conversation with someone and I'll say, oh, can you send me a template of, and I'll say, certainly, here, I'll just transfer this now. And so I can actually send it to them. Now, I can also use my Dropbox and send a Dropbox link they can click on, but often I'll have that turned on because it just, when they're here and now and asking for it, it's just another way to add value. But again, you've got to just be aware who controls it, where's it from.
Awesome. Surveys, we'll talk about surveys. Polls.
I love polls. Big fan of polls. And we're going to talk a little bit later, but it is a great way to keep people engaged about what's going on. You need to pre-prepare them, but you do need to have it turned off.
Who can start sharing? So a lot of these are fairly straightforward.
So see that screen share one? I would have that set to who can share their screen is just the host only. And the reason for it is you can down the track, change that, but having host only means that I'm the only one who can share the screen, so we don't accidentally have other people share their screen. Or unless you're going to be doing a workshop for people and saying, okay, show me what you've got. And a very cool thing is that I've used quite a few times is not only can they share their screen, but I can then control it.
And annotation, I love annotation. You can come up to the bar here, and if I come to, there it is there, annotate, and I've got a spotlight. So when I switch the spotlight on, it follows my cursor around. So this can be really great when I'm wanting to show people where something is sitting.
It's very powerful. It's like a whiteboard as well. You can write notes on the screen, and if you want to highlight certain elements, if you're showing slides, you can really dictate a whole lot of stuff there. So it can be a very powerful thing to use.
And it's easy to switch on and off by just coming back up here. It's a toggle on, toggle off feature, so you can use that within your presentation.
And you can change colours to make it brand specific, etc., etc. You know, do what you need to.
Things to do in your copious free time. We've got remote control.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what I was saying before is, let other people sort of control what's going on your screen.
Breakout rooms. Let's come down to breakout rooms.
Breakout rooms are very, very powerful. For those of us who are used to running workshops and saying, right, in a group of 4, talk about what do you think about, I don't know, price of rice, whatever it is. You can get together and have a chat and say, okay, let's take some summaries from different people. The breakout rooms are exactly the same. You can randomly allocate. You can actually allocate people specifically if you want them to work together. It does take a bit of effort. So if you're going to have some detailed use of a breakout room, you really need to have someone, a second person, operating the Zoom system when it comes to allocation, because you can be talking while they're quickly allocating and then sharing out to the room, particularly if you've got a large number of people in a breakout. But it's very, very powerful.
Awesome. Okay, and further down we've got remote support, closed captioning, save captions, far-end screen control, group far-end camera control, group high definition and virtual background. Would you like to talk to any of those? Yeah,
so closed captioning is really cool. They use a thing called Otto.ai, which helps generate subtitles or captions as you go. So that's very powerful, and you can save that information. Not always accurate, particularly with an Australian accent. Got to say that. Group HD video, turn it off. At the moment, our internet is completely overwhelmed, and I've got to tell you, most people are watching on small screens, so having HD video makes all it does is chew up a ton of data. So at the moment, if you've got a choice to select standard definition, every time, do it. Virtual background, I love. I use it all the time. What I do is I create a new slide deck where I'm standing to one side and have my slide on the other side, and I just keep changing virtual backgrounds. Your new, more powerful computers don't even need a green screen. It just does it automatically. And the system will tell you whether your computer is power enough. So it's so powerful enough. So check that out and have a look at that. But there's a lot of people mocking virtual backgrounds online because they're quite obviously virtual backgrounds and they're trying to pretend they're in an office when they're clearly not. And sometimes people with curly hair, it's not an experience I've had, find that the virtual background gets quite fuzzy around the outside. I do know a lot of the Broadway shows are actually releasing some magnificent pictures of their sets to use as virtual background. So for a bit of fun, if you want to do that, have a crack at those. But I use them for my slide and branding. I've had a couple of customer meetings and used a virtual screen, and I can't tell you how impressed they were for something that took me 5 minutes to whip up in Canva.
So what we might do is once we finish looking through the setup information we've got here, we might just come back and have a little bit of a chat about some of that stuff.
Certainly.
Okay, so if we scroll further down, I want to make sure that we cover some of the priority things. So
the waiting room one is one that you really want to look at. So the waiting room is great because it puts people into a waiting room and you get to select who's coming in. This is critical if you are running coaching sessions and you have back-to-back coaching sessions, as I know many people do, or if you're a counsellor or something like that. So you can have people lining up in your room, and so they don't just bomb on in when you're talking to someone else, who might be in a deep emotional state. So it's a great way to control it. It's also a great way to control who's coming into your meeting room. Some corporates might have a corporate license that they're sharing certain meeting rooms. I know for me, I have a personal meeting room and I use it for most of my sessions. Therefore, I want to know, okay, has one meeting finished and another one started? And I've got to tell you, I'm having a lot of virtual cocktail parties at the moment, and I don't want, one group of friends coming into the other because I don't think they're missing out. So it's the kind of thing that you can do.
Awesome. And we've got live streaming, etc., that you can easily get into.
Live streaming is great because you can just project onto Facebook or wherever else you want to live stream without having to have StreamYard or one of those other services.
Awesome. So now we're down to email notifications. So we've got cloud recording when the cloud recording's available. Some of these are fairly self-explanatory, but options for you to choose as you go on. Anything to add there, Warwick?
No, look, as you say, most of them are pretty self-explanatory. Be aware of the cloud meeting service at the moment because the internet's so clogged. The quality of the recording sometimes isn't that flash. Also, if you are doing something like I do, which is I zoom in on my green screen to get the effect I want, the quality of the recording is not as good because I don't have the best camera in the world, so I lose some of that resolution. So just be aware of those with the recording. Often it can be better to record to your local device, but you don't get, when you record to the cloud, you get multiple different recordings, which you can't get recording locally. So just keep that in mind.
So, so they're the basic pieces that you can set. So I'm just going to pop back and we'll have a bit of a conversation. Okay, so Warwick, we've talked about the setup. Let's now look at scheduling a meeting and how we can customize your phone number, personal branding, etc. So I'm going to schedule a new meeting. And we'll call this Donna and Warwick Good Times. All your meeting details, your timing, etc., how long you want it for. Should we put registration required? Why would we put that on?
Registration's really good because you can, in the registration, say, hey, by registering for this webinar, you subscribe to my database, or you can capture their information. So, and you can dictate what information that you get. So if you're running a series or something, it's great to identify who it is that's going to be on the call. So that can be a good thing to know if you're putting it out there for the world. If it's a private webinar for people who are already on your database, you might not want to do this. One of the key things before we move on is the time zone. You've got to make sure that time zone's right. I can't tell you the number of times I've accidentally not looked at the time zone, assumed it was going to be okay, but it wasn't, and it got me a bit confused. So always check the time zone.
Awesome. There's the meeting password that we talked about before. And down here is the audio piece. Now, for anybody who's in Australia, when you actually get Zoom, you'll probably find that it directs to the US. And that's not so good if a lot of your work's in another country. So when you click on edit, it brings up a dialog box, which I'm hoping you can see okay there, Warwick.
Yeah. No, that's good.
And you can see here I've switched on, I've activated Australia. It will force you to leave the United States there temporarily. I do a bit with the US, so I like to leave those two in, but let's just say you were regularly doing stuff with Singapore, for example. You might want to have those elements switched on.
And now that we're doing more and more virtually, I always like to include the countries that I've done business with in that time zone. So like New Zealand, Singapore, Hong Kong, I think it has its own country under China, Philippines, Malaysia, that kind of stuff.
Awesome. So we'll just click save there to come out of that. We can enable a waiting room. So if this was a meeting, again, if you were talking about the back-to-back coaching stuff like you were talking about before, any other ideas where you might use a waiting room?
Yeah, just basically to control who comes in. And it's making sure, and if you're particularly known for being late to your own meetings, not a bad idea to have the waiting room that lets people know something's happening once you get there.
Awesome. Okay, so now the key thing here is it's not until we save and we've chosen the required option in the registration area there. So when we click save, that's when we get the ability to do some of the personal branding, etc. Now,
I'm relatively new to this. What I would used to do is if I was holding a free webinar, I would use something like Eventbrite or Try Booking to manage all my bookings. And then I realized it's already built in Zoom. Why would I take them another step? So as you scroll down, you'll see that there's some branding as part of the registration so that we can see, can set it up so people can register with our own branding.
Okay, before we go down there, let's talk about this URL. So the URL I've got here is quite long and you'll see it, but it's blurred out for obvious reasons. But what could we do? Because, you know, that sort of stuff looks a bit messy. Warwick, what can we do?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in shortening the URLs. My thing's always make it easy for your registrants, make it easy for the customer. So you can use something like bit.ly or tiny URL. I know for me, with my standard meeting room, I've set up a web redirect. So, and you can do something like, if you own your domain name like warwickmerry.com, I can do a subdomain of zoom.warwickmerry.com. So I can just say to people, hey, I'll meet you on Zoom. Just go to zoom.warwickmerry.com. That's not my redirect. I've used a different one, but that's something that you can do. You can buy a domain name called meetingswithwarwick.com and redirect it to your standard meeting room or update it as your meetings change. It makes it so much easier. Now, often they're getting a link and often they'll click on whatever the link is, or you might send them the URL and or the shortened URL, and they'll click on it and that'll come up on their screen. But I got to tell you, there's no way I'd want anyone to have to type that in.
Absolutely. So the other thing that I do is I'll often type the word in an email. So I'll say, click here to join, and I'll highlight the word here, and then I'll insert a hyperlink. That's the hyperlink to this long link. So on the screen, they only see the word here. They link, it takes them where the long link is, but they don't have the complexity, or it doesn't look odd that there's all this text on the screen.
It's all about making it easy.
Absolutely. So that's the short link, and some ideas around making it look good. Now you'll notice down here we've got delete this meeting and save as a meeting template. I certainly wouldn't want to save this as a meeting template yet. I might have the same framework that I'm going to use over and over again, but just with minor changes for my my webinars. So I can actually go to branding. I'll come back to email settings in a minute, but if we go to branding first. So depending on how this is all set up, you may find that if you're under an enterprise version with an organization, it may have a banner there that you need to adjust. So you can come in here and like for me, I actually put in my business logo as the banner, and the logo bit down the bottom here, I've got an image of myself. So you want to keep them low resolution images, and you can see the dimensions that it's looking for here.
It's very easy using Canva to just whip something up. I'm running a series called Wednesdays with Warwick just during this moment where people can get together and just have a chat. And so I've created a Wednesdays with Warwick banner that I've uploaded, and it just adds a little bit of branding that makes it look a little bit more schmick.
Awesome. So let's come back to these ones here. So the first tab here is registration. We can see nobody's registered because we've just created it. It's just got the details here. Email settings. This enables me to have, in this case, it's my details because it's my Zoom account we're using today, and a confirmation email to registrants. So I can go to edit here, and you can see down the bottom here, it's got the Australian numbers and the US numbers because they were the two options I selected. It's going to automatically pick up the title of our meeting invitation, and I can put in some details here. Now, one of the things I've been doing, Warwick, is if I've got a handout that I want people to download, for example, I can put a short link here to send them to my website to get the handout. That saves me sending out an additional email to them with any documentation that they're going to need.
Yeah, look, it's a very powerful way to give them what they need beforehand, or some background reading. I know for, I was doing something on how to run webinars, and so I sent a link to, remember that the guy who was being interviewed and his kids came in on him, and then he's, so I said, here's some previewing of what not to do or what can happen. So you can use it for a bit of fun. It's really important to personalize these things. It's also important to understand most people don't read the emails you send them. So don't be upset if they haven't read it and done what they're supposed to. It's just human nature in dealing with emails.
But the other thing too is it creates a system, and if you've set up this confirmation and then once you've done it, you save it as a meeting template, then next time you come to create the meeting, you can use that template and half your work's done. Yeah,
it's very good. But again, don't forget, make sure you set up everything you want first, like the polling one, which is there as well. This is where you set up the polls so that you can't just on the fly create a poll. Well, you can, but it takes a bit of time and effort. It's far better to do it here and now. So it's very simple to add a poll with a few questions. So Donna, let's just add a quick poll about, are you having a fun time, yes or no? Because, this is fun times with Donna and Warwick. Oh, sorry, good times. Well, same.
Now you'll have to excuse me, Warwick, because my fingers don't have inbuilt spell checkers.
Look, neither do mine.
And you can see here that there's an option for anonymous. So maybe you don't want people to put their names, or when the poll comes back, you don't want to be able to see names. So are you having a good time?
And so we can set this up so there's a single choice. So it's either yes or no, or you can do multiple choice, meaning that they can, well, it could be a yes, but it might be I need alcohol to get me through it, whatever it is. So you can have multiple items. And I've got to tell you, like Donna's doing now, I always throw a few furfies in just to make people laugh a little bit. because laughter really helps people engage. Like in terms of when you're running a live workshop, having a bit of a joke and a bit of fun really engages people. And I challenge you to come up with such a serious topic that no fun is allowed. I don't think you'll find one. So throwing a few fun answers in there can be really good. Something as simple as if you're doing yes or no, you can do yes, one in all uppercase, and then one is lowercase of yes, and say in brackets without shouting. And I've had quite a few people have a chuckle at that one. So
awesome. So we'll click save there. We've got a poll. So now what we've done is we've scheduled a meeting. So I'm just going to pause and we'll stop the share and we'll come back and have a bit of a chat. So some things I know for a number of people who'll be watching this, they're PSA members. So let's talk about money and payments.
So one of the things that Zoom does very well is you can monetize this. So you can set up so that a payment is made for people to register for your webinar or for your meeting. As an enterprise license, the money always goes to who holds the license. So that would go to PSA. We're quite grateful for any hard work that you do and the money goes to PSA. That's fantastic. But it may not be what you're after. So what you can do is set up, you might have a payment gateway on your own website. So once people register there, they then get sent an email saying, here's your link to join the meeting. You may set up something on one of the payment event websites like Try Booking, Eventbrite, whatever one that you prefer to use. And again, after the payment's been made, you can then send them the link in part of the email process. That's the way around that. So yeah, just if you are using an enterprise license, just be aware the money will go to the holder of the enterprise license. If you're using an individual license, that money will come to you.
So Warwick, before we talk about the things you need to know when running webinars or meetings, let's just take a quick look at webinars. And as you were saying to me off air, the webinars and meetings aren't all that dissimilar in how you set them up, right?
Correct. Look, the only difference really is participant management. So in the webinar settings, you don't have breakout rooms because you're not actually in that engagement kind of level you are in a meeting. A webinar is more about we are presenting to a large audience, and however large that is, can be as large as your license is. Oh, and by the way, if you've got a license for 100 people and you've got 120 people trying to join, what you'll find for the 101st person who tries to join, they'll hit that waiting room that says until someone leaves, you can't enter, just so you know what's going to happen there.
Awesome. Good
but
to know.
With a webinar, it's you invite whoever your co-host or co-panelist is, you give them access to come on the screen, and then essentially you have a conversation or a dialogue. You might share your screen, you might present your PowerPoint slides or your keynote slides or whatever you're doing, and the other delegates can listen. Now they can chat to you, they can ask, they have a good Q&A function as well, which allows them to ask a question. You can invite them on air to actually talk with them and resolve that question and dismiss them. You can quickly incorporate that question into whatever you're talking about, or if the question's irrelevant or impertinent even, you can just dismiss that question and you can mark them as answered, and they'll still have a history of them so you can go back to them if you feel it's appropriate. So they're the main difference with webinar. The style, the way you approach it is very, very similar. The technology is the same. The joy with Zoom, is that if you've set up a meeting and you're thinking, wow, I've got a lot more people, I want to turn it into a webinar. If you have the webinar license, you've only got to click a button and it'll turn it over into a webinar. If you create a webinar, you don't get too many, you want to make it a meeting, you click a button and it turns it back into a meeting. So it's really flexible. So technologically, it's also very similar. It's just who gets to share their screen and who gets to be on screen or not that is the difference.
So based on what you were just saying there, Warwick, about converting a meeting to a webinar or a webinar to a meeting, providing you've got the license, let's just pop over and take a look at where that is. So here we are in the meeting that we just created. If we go down to the bottom here, right down the bottom. Now I'll just switch the annotate on so that I can spotlight it and people can see. So it's right down here. It's pretty tiny, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know why they kept it so small, but it's right at the bottom, and you've got to do this before you start. I don't think you can halfway through convert it, but before you start, if you decide you want it to be that, click on that. And that's really important because if you set up another webinar, it has a different link, it has a different style of link. You've got to try and convert people across. I've been running a few sessions of late that we've had to do this because we've had hundreds of people register, and we thought we cannot have hundreds of people sharing our screen. We need to go to a webinar.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, the more people you have in a meeting, the more it's going to chew up your bandwidth and IT and stuff, and things will slow down, and that does not make for a good meeting or a webinar, does it?
Not at all. That's one of the biggest things is your bandwidth. You've got to make sure you've got as much as possible. So just speaking on that, if you've got the option to cable your computer, so use the Ethernet cable, do it. It's so much faster than trying to use Wi-Fi.
Awesome. Okay, so while we're here, let's now go up to webinars. So I've got webinars over here. Now the setup process is pretty much the same, and you can also create webinar templates as well and see access on your previous webinars. So I'm just going to click schedule a webinar. So we'll pop in a webinar. What will we call this webinar, Warwick?
How to get things done, because that's what we're all about, getting things done.
Awesome. Now, if you've got a template, you can use it. So see down here, I've got AUS phone and PSTC branding. My company's called Prime Solutions Training and Consulting. So when we looked at the branding piece, I saved that as a template. So I can use that template at any time, or I can start with a new one. So I'm gonna choose that one, and then it keeps everything consistent. We scroll down, registration, you'll definitely want registration required. Now, I'll share with you briefly why. You can see we've got the phone number, Q&A. I could have a practice session if I had a co-host. I can also make the webinar on demand. This is really useful because with Zoom, you could actually make this webinar on demand to be able to let anybody access it at any time after they've logged on. If you've got the enterprise version of Zoom, you probably don't want that because it's not a pay-per-view sort of scenario. Anything you'd like to add to that?
Again, this is where it comes back to making the webinar on demand. If you have the linkage available, you could set up an event where they pay for the event and then go through and see that webinar. So there are workarounds even with the enterprise license. But this is very powerful because you can create something once, maybe run a couple of the same webinars, and once you've got it pretty schmick in a way you like it that has some interaction from different people, turn it into a product. It's a great way to productize some of the work that you've done.
Awesome. And you'll notice down here it's got record the webinar automatically in the cloud. Now, as we mentioned before, depending upon what's happening in your part of the world, a lot of bandwidth being taken up, and some of the recordings that are going to the cloud are A, taking a long time to render, and B, the quality sometimes not as good as you want it. So taking the tick out of this box allows you to record it locally, but just be aware that you may find you don't get everything that you get when you record to the cloud. So if we come down here and click on schedule. So I've now scheduled that. It's got all my details. Now you'll notice that it's got a few more options. So I've got options here at any point in time to see how many registrations I've got, to be able to import that in so that I can see where people are from. The email settings, if I go into that area, I can create a confirmation email. I can have reminder emails. So this is great. It enables me to send reminder emails a week, a day, an hour before. I tend to do a day because realistically, I don't really care about getting a reminder a week prior. That's awesome, but I'm really just worried about what's going to happen in the next day or even the next couple of hours. What about you, Warwick?
Yeah, I'll do the day and the hour. And the reason for that is the day before is going, oh yeah, that's right, I must do this. And then the hour before is the whole, oh yeah. Because no matter how often you say to people, create a calendar item or make a calendar item available, often they'll forget and they'll go, oh, I forgot, have you got a recording? And it happens a lot. So a week before is too far out.
Absolutely, absolutely. You've got an option here for follow-up emails. So I can send a follow-up email to attendees. So I've done this with a lot of presentations, and what this enables me to do is put in some details, and maybe I want to do a post-session survey. So I use Microsoft Forms. I'll send them to a link to get them to give me some feedback. You could also send them to bonus items. You could put links to the downloads, etc., all of that sort of stuff here. And you can specify when it's going to send that email out. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's a really powerful way of looking after your attendees.
great. So, and you can have a follow-up email as well to those people who registered but maybe didn't come on board. The branding is the same as in a meeting. The polls are the same. You would set those up beforehand. So if we come to the Q&A section, what are your thoughts on this bit, Warwick?
Big fan of the allow anonymous questions. What I've found over the years is if people can disguise who's asking the question, you get a far more honest question. Either they don't want to be seen to be stupid or be embarrassed or be shamed or whatever it is. So I'm a big fan of allowing anonymity. Now, people with big egos like myself always make sure you know who the question is from. But it gives you, for the introverts out there, it gives them an opportunity to express themselves without that fear of any reprisal or even identification.
Live streaming, that enables you, after you launch the webinar, you click more, which is an option in the bottom right of your toolbar that enables you to share to Facebook, YouTube, and a Workplace. Have you used Workplace before, Warwick?
I haven't used Workplace. I've used the other two, and I've got to tell you, it's very powerful to grow your message, because what I found is if you say to the people, you go to Facebook Live as an example, and then say to the people on board, hey, can you share this with your contacts? And the link to join the webinar or the link to join the meeting is there underneath it. So people can actually see it on one of these services, but come and join the live. And if they miss it, they can see the replay afterwards. It's a great way to share your message out. Really good for those kind of webinars or sessions that are that leader kind of that opening the funnel, getting people to do the very first thing to become part of your contacts. So it's a really powerful way to spread the scope of your message.
So I want to draw your attention back to something else that I've been doing, Warwick, in the invitations area. So as I scroll down this area here, when I click on edit, it brings up the registration screen. It enables me to determine whether I want to automatically or manually approve people, restrict the number of registrants. So that'd be useful if I was doing something and I sold it to a client and only allowed them to have 10 attendees. And you can see some of the options here. I want to draw your eye to some of these areas here. So in some of my corporate webinars, what I do is ask for additional details. So first name and last name of people. Sometimes I'll ask for their organisation they work for. But the custom questions area is great, because what I can actually do here is I can create a question that I can ask people as part of the registration process. So the beauty of this is I can send them almost like a pre-session survey, gather some information as part of that registration process, and when they register, they'll put in their name details and they'll be asked a question. All of that information, when I actually save my webinar and come back up here to the top area, I can come back to reports and I'll be able to grab information on my webinars. So I can come into the webinar area here. I can put in a registration report and I can actually choose a date. And when I choose a date, I can pull out a CSV file that will tell me a list of the names of people that are registered, the organisations if I've asked, and the answer to the question that I've asked. So that's really powerful. It means that I can pull that information out before I actually start doing my webinar.
So that's got to be very powerful to pre-qualify people in terms of getting a base level of what they might understand about a certain topic, find out what their needs are, and it's going to help you more when it comes to presenting the webinar as well, yeah?
Enables you to customize. But what I find with a lot of my clients is they want to know who registered for it. And if I've asked any specific questions, they want to know who's asked what questions. So this enables me to give them a printout, because they've paid for it. It's for their staff, and provide them with details on what people have said are the issues for them. Awesome. So let's come back and have a bit more of a chat about some more logistical, in the moment sort of things. Okay, so that pretty much covers the techie stuff, but we wanted to throw in some little bits and pieces that are helpful when you're running a meeting or a webinar. So what do you got for us, Warwick?
I have so much information. We talked about virtual screens before. Should we have a quick chat about virtual screens?
Oh yeah, sounds good.
Now, as I said previously, the virtual screens are really good for, if you've got a more powerful computer, it does it automatically now. So what it can do, like, if you look at my shelving and stuff, it's a little bit messy. And I've got to tell you, the number of speakers I know who, like myself, put all their products there. So yeah, buy my stuff, but they'll turn it around, whatever you do. And I found when I'm looking at other people's backgrounds, I lose what's going on because I'm staring at the background. You can use virtual screens. Now, the more modern computers, as I was saying, have the power to do it. I'm using a bit of an old computer, so I actually use a green screen. And the green screen is a better way because it's more stable. Now, because I do quite a few of these online sessions, I've actually put my green screen on a roller blind. I'm going to turn back to Donna as I drop my green screen, and hopefully the curtain rod doesn't fall.
Gotta love it. So it's also really important, and I'm sure Warwick will talk about it, is to have some really good lighting. It can be hard if you've got blinds, you're in a home office these days, and there we go, there's your green screen. Now, I do notice that we've got a bit of bookshelf on the side. How might you fix that?
So the way I fix it is I'm using an app called Eyeglasses. So what that does is it uses my webcam and gives it the zoom capacity. I lose quality of the shot, but what it means is I can change my camera, and if I can just move this across here like that, and that allows me to have full green screen. So then when I want to do something like, I create my different slides. So I'm part of a group, and we talk about a few different things. So we call ourselves Pod Power. And so I can do some branding like this, you know, our little picture of our little pod, you know, peas in a pod and a bit of other stuff. I was hosting an event the other day, which was, you know, FU COVID-19. And so I can create backgrounds like this with their branding, my branding, a bit of a theme of what's going on. I also sing in a choir, and so I can have, this is the curtain of the State Theatre in Melbourne. So you can do this kind of stuff, and it allows you to do whatever. Wednesdays with Warwick, as I said before, so I'm doing, so I've got the camel there for, you got to get used to being like a weather person and like, here's the camel. But it can be a very powerful way to share the screen, but it does use more computer power, and so you just need to be aware of that. But it is a very powerful thing to do. So I'm going to go back to my normal. So yeah, so when I go back to my normal camera, you'll see it's cropped everything and banged it on the green screen. So what I will often do is I will have my slides set up so that they're all virtual backgrounds, and instead of changing my slide deck, I just go slide 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Be aware when you upload them that often if you turn your computer off and then back on again, or you turn off Zoom and on again, it can shuffle the order of the slides you've uploaded. So what I will typically do is have them all in a JPEG file, and then when I'm ready, upload them all just before the presentation, and then I'm good to go. So that's how I use the virtual screen.
So the virtual screens, if you go down to the bottom left-hand corner of your screen and click the up arrow beside video, that's where you access them.
And so that takes you to the settings. It opens up a settings window where your virtual background is.
And if you're unsure about the size to have for your virtual backgrounds, the sizing's there when you go in there. It tells you what to create. So you could get one created on Fiverr, Canva, with your graphic designer, any of those people. Yeah.
And look, I just stick to standard TV size, so it's 1920 by 1080. Whenever I'm creating something in Canva, that's what I create, and I save it as a low resolution JPEG file because you don't need the high res.
So 1920 by 1080. I'm just
jotting
down that piece of information. And why would you not save it as a PNG? What's the difference?
PNGs, often if there's white, we'll put nothing. And so you'll see through and see the green. Often they're a larger file as well. And the reality is when we're doing this kind of stuff, small is better. So the smaller size, file sizes makes all the difference.
Awesome. Okay, so that's virtual backgrounds. Talk to us about some energy and etiquette, because I don't know about you, but I've been on some pretty boring as all get out webinars, and I don't like the word webinar. I think it sort of devalues what this sort of thing is.
For sure.
Presentation.
Before I get too carried away, I'm going to roll up the green screen because I'm finding it quite distracting. Look at myself, and I want the wider screen. So Donna, give me some of the tips. What have you seen that works really well in interactions with people, either online or how you interact with people on the other side of the webinar?
Awesome. So one of the great things I've seen, and this is only available in meetings, and that is the breakout rooms. Now, breakout rooms enable you to be able to break your audience into groups. So, for example, if I share my screen now, let's see if this comes up. I don't think it's going to come up, but yes, it will. Yes, it will. There we go. Can you see that?
Yes, I can.
So currently, because there's only Warwick and I on this, and I'm going to assign the participants in this webinar to a breakout room. So there'll be one person in each room. So because I'm the host and Warwick's the co-host, it's splitting the participants up. I can have the ability to automatically have Zoom assign how many of the participants I've got into however many number of rooms. So it will automatically do it for you, or you can change the number of rooms, or you can manually do that. And you can choose to create rooms. And when you do that, it will list the participants and enable you to assign who they're going to go to or who's going to go where, and then you can share them and get them into their breakout rooms, and from there you can actually type in notes that get pushed out to all the breakout rooms, and a little box pops up from the top saying you've got 30 seconds left. So now let's come back to you, Warwick, and talk about some energy and engagement.
Let me just quickly wrap up breakout rooms and saying they're very, very powerful, but it takes a little bit of practice to get the hang of them. If you're having cocktail parties with friends over Zoom or something like that, it's a great way to just have a play. I think with everything we've been talking about today, the best way to get better is do it. So have a play, get a few friends on, get a few colleagues on saying, I just want to check how this works, bear with me. It's better to have a play with people you know who know you were just playing than trying to do it the first time with a formal group of people who really need to be there. So give that a crack. All right. When you are running online sessions, and like Donna, I am not a fan of the word webinar, Roger Corville, who to me is the absolute legend and in this area. He knows everything about them and every platform. And the tips we're giving you now are platform independent. You could use Connects, GoToWebinar, Facebook Lives, whatever it is, the tips are the same. You have to channel your inner radio DJ. Now, by that, what I mean is not, hey, Dylan, you've won a new car. But one of the things on radio that they abhor is dead space, when it's like just dead air, no talking. In fact, their software, after a certain amount of time, will kick in and play something. That's how important it is to them. Same with this. There's nothing worse than sort of standing there going, oh, yeah, the webinar's starting in 5 minutes. It's uncomfortable, so don't do it. You've got to be able to talk about nothing for a long period of time. I will frequently join my sessions, webinar or meeting, 5, 10, even 15 minutes beforehand, because people will get there early. They'll often just jump on just to get it set up and they'll keep doing whatever. And I'll start engaging with them. I'll start asking them questions. I will start finding out what's going on. I'll start asking, what sort of coffee do they like? What sort of dogs do they have? What's their cat's name? Just to get that engagement happening. So it's really important to do that. I think the most important thing to do is do what Donna and I have been doing, is looking straight down the barrel of the camera. If you've got 2 screens and you've got it projected over here, it's not the best look. Or if you're looking down the bottom of your screen, you can tell and you're not engaging. You've got to train yourself to look at the camera. If that means get a Post-it note and write look here and stick next to it, do it. It's a really great way to get that human connection. That just counts for so much. Also, be a bit more energetic than you think you need to be. My theory is always you're going to give about 100% of yourself. You're just going to give that everything you've got. They'll take away about 70% and then enact about 50%. So you've got to give that kind of energy, because I don't know if you've been watching some of the late night TV shows that used to have an audience and now don't. The jokes are the same, but there's no laughter. There's no applause. If you've watched some of the sport, the AFL was on, and without the crowd, it just lacked that energy. So there's no energy there, which is why you've got to give more energy for them to achieve it. Sometimes having a duo like Donna and I today gives us people to bounce off, so there's a bit more energy there. If you're not an energetic, high vibe person, get someone else. Either make it an interview or make it somehow interactive between the two of you, so the other people who are watching feel like, oh, we're joining in. Also, make sure you engage the people who are watching. You'll know their names because it'll come up on your managed participant list. So talk to their names. Jane, good to have you here. What do you think about Jane? What sort of coffee do you want? Skinny soy latte. Marty Wilson did a great thing last night. Absolute setup, but it was great. On Friday, he's having drinks with his friends. There was about 15 of them. And they'd obviously set this up, but it was brilliant. He's like, now I'm taking orders. Again, now, Jane, what were you having? Oh, you're having the cup of coffee. And he'd just pretend to give it over like that. And then she'd go, fantastic. Thanks so much. That's great. So they did this sort of mystical, I'm giving drinks around, and it was funny, but it was really good. So do silly little things that can do it, but also tell people what's going on. So as I'm running this and doing this and I'm thinking, what's my next point? I've got a second screen over here. So when I'm turning like this, it's not that I don't care about you. I'm looking at my second screen. Use more slides than you think, because we are now watching what's going on the screen. And by the way, Donna, I'm on a roll here. So if you want to stop me, you stop me. I'm going. You use more slides than you think. So it used to be you'd have a slide, you'd put it up there, you'd waffle on and talk around, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, more slides, power through, power through, power through, and less information on them. I think we've all realised that the day of putting a whole lot of info on slides is not necessary. Now more than ever, if you just want to do a data dump, send them an email. Don't be doing a presentation. If you want to energise and engage and just take some questions and really get to know people, that's what this is all about. So less is more. Also, get away from an hour. It's too long. It is way too long. Less is more. Nice. I run power sessions. I tell everyone they're half an hour and say, I'll stay around for questions. On average, they go for 45 minutes. But in that half an hour, I'm giving a lot of information. And so they're like, wow, I've got a lot. I need to digest it now. And that's enough, versus dragging. So often I'll register for webinars or sessions that I want to be part of, but not go to it because I want the recording. That way I can watch it double speed, because I'm not interested in hearing someone waffle and waffle. So think about what your style is, think about what your audience style is, and how do you match them.
Can I throw in 2 ideas?
Sorry?
Can I throw in 2 ideas?
Please do.
When you've got a handout, it's a great engagement piece to get them to print out a handout and then go, I'm just going to stop for a couple of minutes and I'm just going to get you to write down some notes. So taking them away from the screen and to thinking about what you've actually covered can be really good. And also, a colleague of mine who at the moment's doing psychological coaching. So she's a psychologist, and a lot because of the physical distancing, a lot of the stuff she's having to do remotely through things like Zoom, she's actually finding that it's far more intense. So this delivery mode is far more intense than when you're in person, because you're not reading a room in the same way as you are when you're physically together. You're looking for what cues you can hear from the way people speak, the way they're looking at you, and are they distracted, etc. So, there are other things that we really need to consider. How are we going to break up the session to keep people engaged?
Yeah, and so you need about every 15 minutes, you need to make sure that you're getting the audience to do something. I'd even do it less than that. And I've got, some of my speaker mentors have been saying to me for years, every 7 to 10 minutes, even live, you need them to do something, even if it's as simple as turn to the person next to you. So if you've got a poll, a quiz, taking some questions, instructing them. So I write out in the workbook now, write down what are the 3 things that you're going to do, or send me a text message, or put something in the chat box. So they've got to find a way to replace what they used to do. So, for example, when I was hosting that event last week, we had about 200 people register for it. And instead of, because you can't get applause, I was facilitating 3 different speakers, there's no applause. So I'd say, hey, in the chat box, if you really liked it, type yay. And all of a sudden the screen just goes with all these yays going up. But it gave them something to do. I mean, we knew they were listening, and it meant the speaker, really enjoyed it. One of the challenges of this is you'll do a session, you'll get engagement, and at the end you say, bye everybody, end meeting, and that's it. You're done. And you're like, well, I hope they liked it. So a good routine can be, after you've done it, call someone who was on the call and so whose opinion you respect, and say, how was it? What did you like about it? And it just helps you get that closure, because it can be a real snap in energy to sort of end like that. So look, I think that's going to give you a whole burst of energy, but you're on before you're on, so get on there and start talking, but be respectful of time. Like my thing also is, like, whether it's live or whether you're doing it like this, if you have a 7 o'clock start, you might wait until 2 or 3 past 7, but don't get started. Don't be waiting for everyone. They've missed out, they'll get the recording. And don't be scared not to record either. And what I will often do is, if people come along and I am recording, I'll end the recording and say, hey, for those of you who joined us, I've got a few special things. Otherwise, enjoy the recording, end the recording, and do something special for the people who have joined us, just to encourage people to be there, because you want that audience.
One of the other things I was going to say is I participated in a virtual conference recently that was a whole lot of people from around the world, and the facilitator of it all had bathroom breaks. So they had like a 10-minute piece at the top of the hour where they said you can shut off your videos, but people were dancing to music, and it was an opportunity for people to go fill up their water bottles, go to the bathroom, whatever. So if you are going to do longer things, it needs to be far more considered, and you can't just jump in and do stuff. That's where you really need to think about having a moderator or an MC, in much the same way as we've probably all been to physical events where you have somebody who tries to host the event, but they aren't really good at it. You can't get away with that in this environment. It just makes you look unprofessional.
It's too intense. It's not like you're one of 300 people, you're sitting at the back of the conference room, you're not really watching what's going on stage. Here, you're in your face. And when you're doing those bathroom breaks, you've got to give something, so you're not just like, oh, we'll see you in 10 minutes, because some people won't come back. So if you have an MC, and I'd highly recommend myself, that you crack a few jokes or have something. The dancing thing's good, but being led by a human is a far better thing as well.
And encouraging people, if you are having bathroom breaks, not to take their device with them.
Because you don't want to have it slip into the toilet. That's not good.
No, and you certainly don't want some of the videos that have been going around of late and
yeah, that's not something you want to share. All right.
So
What's
I think
next?
That's pretty much, I don't know. I think that pretty much covers it. Warwick?
There's a couple of other things that I think we just need to sneak in here at the end.
Over to you.
And that is, you've done the cloud recording, you've got your transcription, you've got the video or whatever. Now's the time to turn that into some kind of product that you can either sell or give away. You can choose to do it as one big long product. You could choose to chop it into little breaks and put it in an online service ability like Thinkific or Teach or whatever. So you need to look at, how can I do this? Don't be afraid to use a product like Zoom and have no audience but record a product, because the technology is really good. Record it straight to your own computer, and that creates the video audio setup that you're after. So it can be a great way to create some great product as well. So keep that in mind, and you can do things like record whatever the session is, and then, as we said, have the webinar on demand, or turn it into a product, or chop it down, or edit into the core functionality. I have always found with a 1 hour session, there's typically 30 to 40 minutes of core things. So you can choose to do that as well. So there are some great, I know other people who have done a series of webinars, got the recording and got a VA to turn it into a book, because they've got all the, so there's so many different options that you can productize some of the work that you're doing. I'm a big believer in recycling. You do something once, you use it multiple times. So again, the final message that I would give is just do something. At the very least, have a cocktail party with friends to play on the technology, but get started, do something and have fun.
Yeah, my thoughts are exactly the same. Just make it more conversational. It doesn't need to be like getting up in front of 500 people. I remember when I did my first presentation on Sunrise, I was talking to a PR person, and she gave me a bit of advice that's always stuck with me. People want you to succeed. They're not chasing you down the street like a current affair because you've done something bad. They're there to see you succeed. So they will put up with bits and pieces, but if there's too many little mistakes, just impacts on your own brand and your professionalism. So as Warwick said, look for people that you can practice with just to try things out. And from me, thank you very much for joining us today. And Warwick, over to you.
Thank you, Donna, for being the driving force behind this and making this happen. So good luck with you as you go forward. We haven't even talked about the technology because there's so much conversation out there. The one tip I would give is get your audio right. It's more important than the visuals. Get the audio right. It's so important. And have a look for that, or get in touch with us and we'll have a conversation with you. But thanks for joining us. I wish you all the very best. If you have any questions, get in touch. We're more than happy to help.